5 lies fearful avoidants believe that destroy their relationships. Fearful avoidants often want love more deeply than almost anyone around them. But at the exact same time, they fear love more than they understand. Part of them longs for closeness, safety, and emotional intimacy with another person. Another part becomes terrified the moment that closeness actually begins to appear. This creates one of the most painful relationship experiences a person can live through. Because the very thing they want most becomes the thing they instinctively push away. And behind this painful cycle usually exist several powerful beliefs that feel completely true to them. Unfortunately, these beliefs are often the very things destroying the relationships they desperately want to protect. The first lie fearful avoidants believe is that love always leads to pain eventually. Many fearful avoidants learn very early that closeness and pain often arrive together. Love may have come with criticism, unpredictability, emotional neglect, or sudden abandonment. As a result, their nervous system quietly learned an important but dangerous lesson. If you get too close to someone, you will eventually get hurt by them. That belief may have protected them once, but it damages relationships later in life. Because every healthy relationship eventually requires emotional risk and vulnerability. When someone genuinely cares about them, suspicion often appears alongside comfort and excitement. Instead of asking whether someone is safe, they begin asking when the hurt will arrive. They scan for warning signs even when there are none to find. They interpret small disappointments as evidence that disaster is approaching quickly. Eventually, the fear of future pain becomes stronger than present happiness itself, and relationships begin collapsing under threats that do not even exist yet. The second lie fearful avoidants believe is that needing someone makes them weak. Many learned that depending on others eventually led to disappointment or betrayal, so independence became more than a personality trait or personal preference. It became emotional armor designed to prevent future pain from happening again. The problem is that healthy relationships require healthy dependence from both people involved. Trust grows when people allow themselves to rely on one another sometimes. But fearful avoidants often experience dependence as danger rather than connection. The moment they realize someone matters deeply, anxiety often begins growing rapidly. They start worrying about becoming too attached or emotionally invested too quickly. They fear losing themselves inside the relationship or losing control completely. As a result, they pull away exactly when closeness is becoming meaningful. Unfortunately, partners often experience this withdrawal as rejection or lack of interest, and the relationship slowly begins suffering from distance that nobody wanted. The third lie fearful avoidants believe is that if someone truly knows them, they will leave. This belief often lives quietly beneath the surface for many years. Fearful avoidants frequently carry hidden feelings of shame or unworthiness inside themselves. They may believe they are too emotional, too damaged, or too complicated to love, so they work very hard to manage how others perceive them. Some become people pleasers who constantly adjust to keep relationships stable. Others become emotionally guarded and reveal very little about themselves over time. But eventually, every serious relationship requires authenticity and emotional exposure. And that is where fear begins taking control of the situation. Because if someone truly sees the real version of them, rejection feels inevitable. So they hide parts of themselves that deserve understanding and acceptance. Ironically, hiding creates the exact emotional distance they are trying to avoid. Partners often feel shut out without understanding why it is happening, and the relationship slowly loses the intimacy both people were searching for. The fourth lie fearful avoidants believe is that conflict means the relationship is ending. For many fearful avoidants, conflict feels much larger than simple disagreement. Arguments may trigger memories of abandonment, rejection, or emotional chaos from the past. As a result, even healthy conflict can feel emotionally overwhelming or dangerous. A small disagreement suddenly feels like evidence that the relationship is failing. Instead of working through problems together, panic begins taking over internally. Some fearful avoidants shut down emotionally and become distant without explanation. Others become anxious, overwhelmed, and desperate for immediate reassurance and certainty. They move between pulling away and pulling closer in exhausting cycles. Partners often become confused because the reactions seem larger than the situation itself. But beneath the surface, the fearful avoidant is fighting old fears rather than present problems. Healthy couples understand that conflict can strengthen relationships when handled respectfully. Fearful avoidants often experience conflict as proof that love is disappearing permanently, and that belief makes healthy repair much more difficult than it needs to be. The fifth lie fearful avoidants believe is perhaps the most destructive of all. They believe they must choose between love and emotional safety. Deep down, many fearful avoidants believe these two things cannot exist together. If they feel safe, they fear becoming vulnerable and losing control later. If they feel passion, they fear becoming dependent and getting hurt eventually. As a result, relationships often become emotional battlegrounds inside their minds. Part of them moves toward intimacy while another part desperately runs from it. This push and pull creates confusion not only for them, but also for partners. Relationships become filled with mixed signals, emotional inconsistency, and unpredictable distance. The fearful avoidant may genuinely love their partner very deeply. But love alone cannot overcome beliefs that constantly signal emotional danger. Eventually, both people become exhausted by a battle neither person understands completely. The tragic part is that these beliefs usually began as survival strategies. At one point in life, they probably made perfect sense emotionally. They helped someone survive environments that felt unsafe or unpredictable. But survival strategies do not always create healthy adult relationships later. The mind continues protecting against dangers that no longer exist in the present. Healing begins when fearful avoidants learn to question these old beliefs carefully. Not every disagreement leads to abandonment or rejection in relationships. Not every vulnerable moment ends in betrayal or disappointment. Not every emotional need makes someone weak or dependent. And not every person who gets close intends to leave eventually. The goal is not becoming fearless in relationships or avoiding pain forever. The goal is learning that fear does not always tell the truth. Because relationships are often destroyed not by reality, but by expectations of danger. And when fearful avoidants begin challenging these beliefs, everything slowly starts changing. Closeness becomes less frightening, and emotional safety becomes easier to recognize. Trust begins replacing suspicion one moment at a time. Conflict becomes conversation instead of catastrophe or emotional collapse. Vulnerability becomes connection instead of exposure or weakness. And perhaps most importantly, love stops feeling like a threat that must be escaped. Because the greatest tragedy for fearful avoidance is not loving the wrong person. It is running from the right person, because old fears convinced them they had to. And sometimes the most important relationship battle is not with another person at all. Sometimes it is with the stories fear has been telling for years. Because the moment those stories lose their power, relationships finally have room to grow.